sitting across from me, across the airwaves, all the way in the U.S. of A. is a special guest this week. It's the one and only real Josh Gill.
What is up, guys? So happy to be back.
I'm so happy to have you here. As you know, Richard is like off gallivanting in Italy right now because he's on his Axis Powers tour of the world. He went to
You
Japan
know,
last year. He's in Italy now.
yeah, I was gonna say he seems to have a pattern. Like he seems to have a pattern of like once a year putting himself first above the podcast, above all of the fans, and just disappearing
And
for a couple weeks.
listen, I was in therapy for 3 weeks. Tune in on double dose. Like I don't want to start like weaponizing things or whatever. But I think maybe he's putting himself first a little too much. But
I agree. That said, I am more than happy to step into these shoes and hop on.
any excuse to have Josh Gill back on. Each week we talk about the weird and wonderful world of DC while fielding questions from listeners like you. And yeah, Josh, it's been a while since you've been on. How have you been? Tell the people like what you've been up to.
Man, I've been great. I think I moved, I got married again. Uh, man, like life is really, really cool right now.
Yeah, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, I'm like they're thinking back, it's been what, about 18 months since I was last on. We did all those episodes around Christmas that year.
Yeah, yeah, that year.
Man,
Heavy quotes.
there's been a lot that's changed in the last little bit. I don't know that a 30-second run up is going to cover everything, but man, I'm just happy to be back. I'm happy to jump back in and get to chat comic books with you again, man. It's gonna be fun.
We were chatting Rings of Power before we started recording because we love watching something geeky. We love that stuff. But what if like what's your comic book stuff like intake been like? Marvel stuff, DC, reading, just movies, TV. What's been your like most recent kind of intake of like superhero stuff?
So I still read DC as regularly as I can, trying to read everything that comes out. Um, that's usually how I like to end my day is getting through a couple issues of whatever's been published recently. Man, the big stuff that I've really been loving right now. I mean, I'm currently like starting the Absolute Power arc.
Yeah,
We're a couple weeks into Absolute Power with where I'm at. I'm maybe a month and a half behind of what's current.
yeah. I'm
Uh,
roughly in the same boat. I think.
okay. Like, yeah, I really loved this run of The Flash. With Wally being stuck and doing a lot of more high concept things with what's going on. That's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, it's been pretty heady. All this kind of stuff about like dimensions and math and
Yeah.
all the things that I should have paid more attention to in school so that I could read my comics better.
Yeah, like one of the things that I've really loved about it, and comics being a visual medium, the art's such a big deal with it. Like the art style change from when Wally's in this holding place versus when like we're following the rest of the Flash family, uh, just in the real world, right? Like
Hang on. You know
you,
what I just
you're
realized?
fine.
Hang on. I just want to check. You can hear me, right?
Yeah,
How about now?
that's a whole lot better.
God damn
We
it!
need to
This is
start from the top.
no, but this is what happens when Richard is gone. I'm recording using I have two mics on this desk, and God damn it, I'm using the wrong one.
I mean, remember how I said my volume was way down? I can turn my volume back down a little bit now.
Yeah, there you go. Well,
Yeah,
that's
that's
that's what that was about. Like, be me going back and ADRing my lines for the first part of that episode.
that's fine. We're only 7 years, it's 8 years into the podcast.
Honestly, you would think at this point that any sort of indication of professionalism or skill would have emerged, but
Absolutely not.
this is literally as good as it gets.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. So yeah, Flash has been a really fun one for me. I've been really enjoying the Tom King Wonder Woman book.
Yeah, yeah, that's a
That's been a
solid
lot of
one.
fun. I've really enjoyed just the diving into some of her, some of her lesser known villains, her backstory. Yeah, I've really enjoyed. Like, it's a fun thing, but like I've really enjoyed the little fun backup story following
Yeah.
her daughter with Damien and John.
There have been some
Those have
really
been
good
fun.
little contained adventures of like those
Oh yeah.
three. Yeah, that's been a lot of fun.
The one I just picked up today from the library, Do a Power Bomb.
Oh man,
So,
marvelous Ryan's gonna love that. He's been plugging Do a Power Bomb for like a couple of years now. Yeah.
so I finally picked it up, and then what the one he did maybe right before this was like a heavy metal inspired book.
Right.
I can't remember off the top of my head what it was called, but I was told I would love it just based on who I am as a person
Sure. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
my love of all things like sad boy emo pop punk from the early aughts.
Listen, that's right. That's right where we live, baby. The
Yeah.
thing I've been reading is I recently got the Morrison era Animal Man compendium.
Oh,
So
okay.
I've been going back through that, which is lots of fun. The
Just
Bawana Beast stuff and like the weird invasion tie-ins and yeah, no, it's great. I'm enjoying that. I've gone back through that, and then I also went back and I read the most recent Batman and Robin because I wasn't picking that up as
okay.
it was coming out, just because I would have to be a responsible member of my family and not just get every book. But I went and grabbed the trade, and so I was reading that too. But
So that is that the one where Damien goes to high school?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And it's got
That one was fun.
it's got Shush. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've been enjoying that one. That's a good one too. So yeah, those have been on my list. And then obviously for this week, for what we're talking about, I went back and I read all 26 issues of
Hmm.
Earth 2 World's End. I also I hate when this happens accidentally, and I should have remembered this, but I also ended up having to read issues 0 to 8 of Convergence. Because I forgot that Earth 2 World's End leads straight into Convergence.
Yeah, it does.
And I think this is maybe the fifth time over the course of the podcast where I've had to accidentally go and reread Convergence. Um, so I made myself do that.
For one of the most underwhelming event stories, I don't
Just
want to say bad. It wasn't bad, just
I
underwhelming. It comes up so much.
It's so inconsequential, but it's just because a lot of stuff was happening right at that time. And so it's like
It was a bottleneck of
tech
everything. Like
like
everything
tech
comes in and then comes back out.
and almost nothing comes of it other than the weird Superman stuff that ends up happening, like
Yeah.
having pre-Flashpoint Superman also in the New 52, and then all that lead up, and then Superman Reborn, like mixing their timelines together. It means that Parallax is out there in the universe, but also Hal as Green Lantern, and like
Yeah.
there's a couple of little weird things that like did technically go somewhere, but otherwise, like Convergence, you just kind of go like, what are we even when you get to like metal and death metal, they basically like blow past. It was
Yeah. They're
like,
just like, don't look at that.
don't
Don't
think
look in
about
that corner.
don't think about Telos. Don't don't look over there. But in the context of what we're talking about today, and by the way, first episode of Doctober.
There is
Happy
that.
Halloween. I thought a nice way to start Doctober off, a spooky way to start Doctober off, is with the end of the world, and the world I picked was Earth 2.
That's fair.
So Josh, Earth 2 World's End. Were you an Earth 2 guy as that series was coming out, or did you like go back and were you reading it later? Like what's your relationship with New 52 Earth 2?
So New 52 was right when I got back into comic books.
Right.
And so at that point, I was just taking in everything. And what I really loved about Earth 2 was it was all of the Golden Age heroes put through this modern day twist.
Yeah.
Like some of the costumes looked really cool. Some of them I feel like lost their luster a little bit in the translation. Um, Man, like, okay, the Flash, really basic example, right? Flash
Yeah.
Earth 2. He doesn't look bad,
No, I don't
but
think he
the
looks bad.
classic Jay Garrick costume is one of my all-time favorite costumes.
Yes.
And like losing that a little bit, right? Modernizing it, okay, fine.
I
Uh,
I I totally agree. I like almost all of the costumes on Earth too, but you do kind of go like, but
right. Yeah,
yeah,
like in Alan Scott,
yeah,
say what you will about Alan Scott's original costume. I think it's great. I will die on this
yeah,
hill.
yeah.
He
I
looked
mean,
like,
I think it's hideous as shit, but I also go like,
oh,
that's
for
his
sure.
costume. Like he should be wearing
Right.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Like this Earth 2 revamp of him is almost like we're gonna take Kyle Rayner and mash it with his Sentinel costume, and that's
yeah.
what comes out.
Or
I'm
like
like,
almost like or
okay,
like a sleeker version even of his Kingdom Come
that's what I
costume.
meant. Yeah,
Yeah,
like that. uh, Yeah, whenever he's up on the moon and he's
yeah,
set himself up in that green castle.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I agree. Yeah.
That one. I don't know. Earth 2 was a lot of fun. Like I enjoyed the modernization and retelling of some of these Golden Age heroes and keeping with a lot of their same origin stories.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Jay was still the Helmet of Mercury, Alan is still the Green Flame of Life. Like we get a lot of those things, same things. It's like I was following the Earth 2 stuff pretty closely.
Yeah. Yeah. I I'll say I really liked Earth 2. And then partway through, Earth 2 took like a weird right
Mhm.
turn. And I was like, I still liked it, but I was like, it felt like it was building, and like, let's put the team together. And before they could do that, it took this turn to like, Darkseid's still out there. What if they attack the world? What if there's a big
Yeah.
rip in the world? And then Earth 2 World's End comes out and they're like, here's 26 issues to the end of the world here. And I kind of
Mhm.
went like, oh, okay. Um, and I think a lot of that has to do with the changing creative team.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, suffice to say, even when it like sort of shifted focus, I still enjoyed it. It was entertaining to
Mhm.
read, but
For sure it was.
there is a part of me that kind of just wanted it to like live.
Yeah, like there are questions in there that I don't I would have liked to seen fleshed out a little bit more.
Sure.
Like we meet Dick and Barbara, and like that's really the first time that we as the fans get that, relationship that we've wanted for so long. Hi, I am a Dick Barbara fanboy. I
Yeah,
will
there you go.
also die on that hill. And like as soon as we get it, the world ends.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, okay, so what was the plan with these two in Earth 2?
yeah,
Like, what is he going to become? What is she going to do? And like we first start getting introduced to Ted Grant
yeah,
in World's End, and we're like, oh, okay, cool. So like, one of the best Golden Age heroes of all time, we get for like 5 issues.
yeah,
Sick.
yeah. Really, yeah, yeah.
Like there's just a lot here that I was hoping to get more of.
It's a weird era for sure because in the New 52 there is no Justice Society on Prime Earth. Earth 2 comes out, but it's not like set in the 40s. It's set like contemporary. So like you
Mhm.
said, we have these costume updates and a more modern version of some of these characters. And for a while I was like, okay, so post Flashpoint, we just put them back on their own Earths.
Mhm.
Fine, that's cool. And then I remember this very distinctly. The era right after Convergence, that like DCU, like
Mhm.
YOU or whatever, that a Doctor Fate book came out that was set on Prime Earth, and I this is like one of the most like internet chud moments that I remember having. Is I was like, this doesn't make any fucking sense. Doctor Fate's on Earth too. What are you doing?
Okay,
As
so
because obviously there are other Doctor's Fate out there. There's a Doctor Fate
oh
on
yeah.
Earth 20. There's like there's all Fate is on Earth 13. Like there's this other stuff. I'm not sure that Multiversity had come out at this point. I don't remember. But
Mhm.
there was a part of me that was like, but you were setting it up. We split them up again. So some characters are just on Earth 2 now, and some are just on Prime Earth. And there was just this weird thing where they kind of couldn't make up their mind, I feel like, about who went where and what's the
Mhm.
history. Is the Justice Society part of this? Blah, blah, blah. And then obviously, Rebirth, Metal, Death Metal, we sort of, Doomsday Clock, we've sort of ironed out the kinks of those timelines a little bit. But
For now.
there was a, yeah, for now, but there was a little era in there where I actually got like mad because I was like, you're fucking up Earth 2, because I
Mhm.
liked Earth 2 so much that I was like, you're fucking it up by bringing in a main continuity Dr. Fate,
Yeah.
which is
Like, and that
a weird take to have, I think, and I'm not sure I agree with it, but I do remember feeling that way.
yeah, I mean, I definitely see that. Like, we finally get the Justice Society back after years of them just their characters not even being mentioned in comic books.
Yeah.
And so we're finally getting them back in this new incarnation, and then you go, but no, they're also over here mixed in here, so that doesn't really count anymore. And we're not going to call them the Justice Society. We're going to call them the Wonders
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and all of that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Here's a question I had when I was reading through this again.
Yeah.
Khalid Nasor as Dr. Fate.
Mhm.
Here is where some of my lack of knowledge comes out. Was he introduced prior to Earth 2, like
Nope.
this Earth 2 book, the New 52, or is he an
Nope.
entirely New 52 onward creation?
New character.
Okay. Because as
And
far as I'm concerned, he is Dr. Fate now.
he's a,
Inside.
but he's a different Khalid than Prime Earth Khalid, because
Right.
there's Khalid Nasur, which is I think the Earth 2 one. I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure the Prime Earth's one name is like Khalid Ben Hassan or something like that.
Oh, I think you're right.
He's different. So, but they
Yep.
took the same idea of like, just in the same way that they were like, and we'll make Prime Alan Scott gay, and like they were like, these were good ideas from Earth 2, we should do them over here too.
Right.
And so, but no, Khalid Nasur, he's not from anything before that, as far as I'm aware. Yeah.
Okay. That was one that I'm like, I think this is his first appearance. I'm just not sure.
He's got a great
Uh,
costume because he has
oh, yeah.
almost like a Starboy kind of costume where you see like the cosmos in his suit and then the shiny gold with all the ornate kind of stuff. Like Dr. Fate's got a fucking baller costume anyway, but I really loved Earth 2
He's
Dr. Fate.
Dr. Fate's a top 5 costume of all time.
Absolutely. Um
Just hands
we
down. Uh,
we got all sorts of
the last
questions.
thing I'll throw out for this.
Yeah, yeah, do it.
Yeah. Just the last thing I was going to throw out for this, because I made a bunch of notes as I was reading through it. This is the first thing that I can remember seeing Jorge Jimenez art.
Yeah, I actually I had a moment of that while reading this. You know, this World's End run is odd because like every 3 pages it's like a different creative team. There's
Yeah.
like they assign creative teams, I think, to like threads of the story. And so it's a little bit jarring to read sometimes, but there were a couple of moments where I was like, this feels like Jimenez, and I like flipped to the front again and I was like, ah, yep, there he is.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what it's, all those different creative teams, because if I remember right, this was coming out bi-weekly.
Yes.
It's like, to keep,
Yeah.
it
Or
was not monthly. Was it weekly?
it might have. Okay. New 52 Futures End was coming out
Weekly.
weekly. This
Yes.
was coming out either weekly or bi weekly, but it timed out that they both basically ended around the same time
Right.
because they both lead into convergence.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because
Because,
I just like,
and because part of what was happening in Futures End involved, you're probably right, it was bi-weekly, because part of what was happening in Futures End involved Earth 2 refugees, and so then you
mhm.
were also reading Earth 2 World's End, and you're like, okay, so how does this 5-year possible future in Futures End line up with what's happening in Earth 2 World's End? And then they both end up kind of tumbling into convergence, and then neither end up happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like that's a lot of work to get done. So yeah, we're going to have a lot of creative teams and spreading it out.
totally.
But yeah, this was just, as Jorge Jimenez is one of my favorite working artists today.
Yeah.
And so like I remember seeing him and going, oh yeah, that's good.
Totally.
I don't know what it is about that, but that I like that.
I agree, and I still don't know that I have the right vocabulary to describe what I like about his art, but it's
Same.
so like kinetic, like a lot of movement. Like you get a sense
Hmm.
of like, especially the Batman stuff that Jimenez did. It's just I love that stuff.
It's one of my favorite panels is a Superman panel that he did.
Oh, is it from Death Metal?
No, 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 no. This was way early, and it's just kind of Superman floating in the sky.
Oh,
It's
oh
just it's
yeah, just
so
like
clean
sitting
and just
sitting on the cloud or whatever.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
so clean and it's just like it emanates everything about it. Again, I don't have the vocabulary for it either.
yeah,
I just know I like it, and
totally,
that's good enough for me.
absolutely. All right. Well, we got a ton of questions about Earth 2 World's End. So let's dive right in. We're going to start off on Facebook. Going to the
Going
face
to
and
the
the book.
face and the
Going to the
book, going to the
Facebook.
Facebook.
Yeah. That'll line up in post, I'm sure.
I hope so.
All right. So, the first question comes from Gary Anchetta, who asks, does Earth 2 still tie in with Jeff Johns' Legion of Superheroes? Um, I had to sort of double check this. There's a couple of things here. It does not tie in to a Jeff Johns' Legion of Superheroes, but I think what you're thinking of is New 52 Legion of Superheroes, which I think was Paul Levitz was the writer on that. I can't remember who the artist was. But there, I think maybe it might be the last issue, but near the end of that New 52 run of Legion of Superheroes, there's some offhand, like never been set up before reference to Steppenwolf killing Superman. And
Mhm.
it implies vaguely, I would say, that that run takes place on Earth 2. I Here's my take on it. The whole thing with the Legion of Superheroes at the start of the New 52, and they come out and say it in the first issues, is that they go, something happened in the past and we can't travel to the past right now. And what they're referring to is Flashpoint. And the
Yeah.
reverberations of reality changing haven't hit them yet, which I think is a great little idea. I don't know that the book does a great job of actually exploring that, but they set it up. Now, Flashpoint does affect the entire multiverse, so it doesn't disqualify this from taking place on Earth too. But here's my take. It's an offhand reference. There's almost no setup for this at all. But in that Legion run, a bunch of Legionnaires fucking die, and like a bunch of shit goes poorly, and like the world like explodes, and like it's sort of an unsatisfying Legion of Superheroes run. And so my take is that that line is their sort of like get out of jail free card, which is, oh, it's the Earth 2 Legion of Superheroes. um I I wouldn't put too much weight in that because they sure didn't. Like it's like a nothing reference. There's no real indication that it's Earth 2 other than that one line. But I think that's thrown in as a like, if you're upset, don't worry. It's on a different Earth. I mean, the only other thing I'll say is something that maybe supports that a little bit is the idea from Doomsday Clock that both the Justice Society and the Legion proper haven't been seen in a long time. And that
Hmm.
it's about the Dr. Manhattan thing. So if you go with that, that you could treat that like Earth 2, where it's like we only had these versions of characters for a bit. I think that starts to fall apart because I think Legion Lost, where they're in the present, is kind of definitively on Prime
Yeah.
Earth. Like
So
I
that
I
I was
think it
trying to
falls
remember
apart a
that
bit
one came out around that same time, and that was absolutely happening on Prime Earth.
because they were stuck in the present. They couldn't get back to the future. Da, 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 da.
Of course,
Um,
we could also just throw the fact that, by the time Legion comes around, they absolutely know what the multiverse is, and so they could have been stuck Hawkman style in a in a different universe in a different time.
you know, it
Who
would be the
knows?
easiest thing in the world to comics a reason for how that
Sure.
stuff shook out. But my personal take is that I wouldn't look too hard at that like flippant offhand comment in one issue of Legion. I feel like that's, like I said, like it's like the escape hatch where it's like if anyone has a comment, I'm just going to tell them it's a different Earth. Like that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add to that one.
Yeah. All right, next question from Braden Ketty, who asks, is Supergirl still related to this incarnation of Superman? So on Earth 2.
So what if I remember my history correct, and by that I mean the everything in the last decade. The Power Girl that we currently have is that Kara from Earth 2.
Okay. So I actually think it's more complicated than that.
Perfect.
Uh so the Kara on Earth 2, just to tackle this, that Kara Zor-El is related to the Kal-El on Earth 2.
Yes. They were
Definitively, absolutely.
cousin, also kind of adopted daughter.
Yeah, because like that Clark and Lois sort of adopt her as a daughter on that
Yeah.
world. She and Helena Wayne are
Hmm.
thrown into a portal in the first issue of Earth 2, and they end up on Prime Earth. And
Hmm.
that was their way of doing, here's Power Girl and Huntress, which
They were
totally,
part of Prime Earth for a couple
but
years,
that also
having
matched up.
adventures and
But that matched
yeah.
up with some understanding of those characters from the Silver Age or things like that too. Like, so
Hmm.
that was how they were doing that. So we had Helena Wayne Huntress, we had Kara Zor-El, Power Girl living on Prime Earth. Great, did it, nailed it. They eventually make their way back home in time for Earth 2 World's End, and then they're part of that
Hmm.
series. Great, did it, nailed it. The Power Girl that we currently have on Prime Earth, uh, here's my thought. She is not the Earth 2
Okay.
Kara. She's the old Earth 2 Kara that gets released from continuity jail when the Justice Society and the Legion come back, I think.
So she is
She's
pre-Flashpoint Earth 2 Kara.
she's the Kara that got folded into one timeline at the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths, who
Okay.
didn't know who she was, who thought she was Atlantean, who blah blah blah, who in Infinite Crisis realized she's from a different Earth, all that stuff, blah 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 blah. She is the Kara we know, except for New 52 Earth 2. This is not the last
Okay.
time this is going to come up, because that Justice Society ends up
Hmm.
in our timeline, but they come from the pre-Crisis Earth 2, which is different from the New 52 Earth 2. And technically
Correct.
speaking, both versions exist. So my assessment of it is that they're different Power Girls.
Sure. And I'm going to defer to you because again, I can't. I've read so much, I can't remember how her story continued on through Convergence and Post. If she just disappeared in Convergence and that's it, or if we had kind of an off. Here's how I. The more we've talked about it, here's how I think I'm going to look at it. Right, like we had some off-panel Power Girl Reborn moment where New 52 Power Girl merged with pre-Flashpoint Power Girl, and now they're all just one.
I I I think they're still separate. And
Are
someone
they?
will have to check the dates on this, but I think Power Girl and Harley Quinn have a team up on Prime Earth around the same time that Earth 2 Society, the series after World's End, where they find a new planet to
Yes.
colonize. I think that is playing out at the same time. And Power Girl is on that Earth. So I think they are separate. I think
Okay.
someone's got to check the dates. I could be way wrong
Sure.
about that, but that's my feeling about it. But the thing I want to come back to is Kara Zor-El is related to Kal-El on Earth 2, but we have a different Superman on Earth 2 as well who comes out, which is Val
Mhm.
Zod, who shows up later. They are definitely not related because they're like romantically linked.
Yeah, they are.
Valzad and Kara on Earth 2 are like a romance, absolutely not related.
I would really hope not.
Well, yeah, I just
Uh,
want to be clear about that.
sure, sure.
Bunch of fucking freaks that listen to this show. So
But to answer the other question, like the Power Girl that we have in continuity right now on Prime Earth is related to Clark that we have on Prime Earth.
uh,
Or are we still doing these? She's from a different
that
multiverse and therefore she's cousins.
Power Girl on Prime Earth, the star of the Power Girl comic that's going on right now, is a resident of Prime Earth because her
Mm-hmm.
pre-crisis Earth 2 was folded into continuity during Crisis. There is
Not confusing at all.
a new Earth 2 with a new Kara who is a Power Girl, but
Mm-hmm.
she comes from an earlier folding of the multiverse. So, because on Prime Earth we also have Kara Supergirl, who is the cousin
Sure.
of Kal-El of that
Yes.
world. And then we also have Kara Power Girl, who's now going by Paige.
Yep.
Um,
That's weird.
Power Girl. It's it's we're getting into Donna Troy territory with Power Girl, to be honest.
Oh, so bad.
It's best not to think too hard about it, but the short version is Earth 2 with the numeral 2 is different than Earth 2 TWO, and Earth TWO no longer exists. And those characters are just part of the history of Prime Earth now, and she's like a
Correct.
weird continuity issue, essentially, a living continuity issue in Prime Earth.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right, let's move from Facebook over to Threads.
I don't know how many thus there are. I just know it's enough that makes Richard uncomfortable.
Oh, don't worry, he won't listen. So on Threads, Mr. E64 asks, "What do you think of the villainous Mr. Terrific from this series, Terry Sloan? And how do you and this is almost a totally different question. How do you think this iteration of Thomas Wayne compares to the one we see in Flashpoint?" So two different things to touch on here.
Two different questions.
Yeah.
So I know Terry Sloan, Mr. Terrific, is a golden age version of Mr. Terrific.
Yeah, the original Mr. Terrific, the guy that wore like a green jacket and a red mask and had the yellow thing that said "Fair Play" on it. He's from the Golden Age, the old Justice Society days and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know if he really was a villain back then or if he was always a good guy.
He was a good guy in like the back
Okay.
then. So
Okay.
the twist of him in the New 52 is that Terry Sloan was like a bad guy, like a villain, like
Well, yes and no. Like I read him a lot as Earth Two's Lex Luthor.
he's got a lot of that energy for sure.
You know, like
Absolutely.
it's like he is in the business of preservation for Terry Sloan.
Yes.
And that is the driving force behind every decision he makes, every backstab. It's this is going to preserve me and what I want.
Right.
And that's it. I fun like his little Mr. 8 costume.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's the thing or not either. Every time I read it, I kept hearing misdirect in my head, which
Oh, that's
I
interesting.
played a lot with that a little bit, like because he kept being a misdirect of he's working with these guys, then those guys, then these guys again.
Yeah, I mean he does like consistently like he makes deals with Darkseid or he like sells people out or whatever, like a lot. But there's a reveal in World's End that he's not from Earth 2
Mm-mm.
and he's also not from Prime Earth. And
Nope, he's from
so
somewhere else.
I have a little headcanon theory that he's from Earth 3 because if Mr. Terrific's whole thing is fair play, he's foul play the whole time. He's
I
kind
like
of
that.
like the
Okay.
opposite, like something selfish, something sneaky. He talks about his world being like destroyed or whatever. I mean, I think technically he's talking about Darkseid destroying his world. What we see from Forever Evil in the New 52 is the Anti-Monitor destroys Earth 3. Um, I that's my little headcanon. I'm not sure that it holds up to scrutiny, but
That's a fun headcanon, though.
they never like say what Earth he's from. They just say
No,
he's not from Earth 2 and not from Prime Earth.
no, I'm here for all that, and it was a lot of fun. Like knowing that he is Mr. Terrific, seeing him and Michael Holt go toe to toe with each other,
Yeah.
that was good. But no, I think that works out really well because we do know that his whole point of he's trying to save Earth 2 because his Earth was destroyed. And then when
Well,
he realizes he can't, he's going to
yeah.
sacrifice it to save another Earth because then
Yeah.
he can at least save an Earth since he couldn't save his.
He's almost got like shitty Silver Surfer vibes where he's kind of like brokering deals with Darkseid about what Earths he can or cannot consume, which is sort of interesting in a way. Because also, like, the whole thing in World's End is that Apocalypse is dying and it needs to like feed on a planet. And like
Yeah.
basically it like opens up and swallows Earth to destroy it and turn it into like raw fuel essentially. Um which is interesting. Um you brought up Michael Holt, we should mention in the same way that Kara and Helena had briefly been transported to Prime Earth, Michael Holt had been transported from Prime Earth to Earth
Mhm.
2, and so
Yeah.
had been
That
sort of
is our Michael Holt.
exactly, yeah. Um, so the second part of this question, Thomas Wayne. We have a Thomas Wayne Batman in Earth 2.
Mhm.
How do you feel about the differences between him and the sort of Flashpoint Thomas Wayne? Because they are different characters.
They are. Uh, Earth 2 Thomas Wayne is, while still not a great person, he's far less violent. Like, we don't see him shooting people like we do Flashpoint Thomas Wayne.
He's a little less indiscriminate, yes.
Yes. He is much more able to work with a team. I don't recall in Flashpoint whether or not Thomas Wayne was a drug addict, like this one was, addicted to Miraclo and Venom.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure he wasn't. I mean, I would say the defining difference between them is that the Flashpoint one, Bruce dies, and that's
Yes.
the trauma that propels him to be that timeline's Batman. Whereas on
And
Earth
this
2,
one,
he survives and the alley. Bruce,
mhm,
like for Bruce, it plays out the way it plays out for Batman. But Thomas just survives, has his death faked by Leslie Tompkins because on Earth 2, this Thomas Wayne is in deep with the Falcons. That sort of
yeah,
thing. And then that like when that world's Bruce finds out he exists, he confronts him and goes like, "Get the fuck out of here. I never want to see you again." Blah blah blah. And it's only after Earth 2's Trinity dies stopping Darkseid that Thomas Wayne reemerges, puts on the bat suit to sort of try to atone and live up to the example of his son. So I think some of the stuff that you're saying, like him being less violent, is a result of Bruce did live. He did like
yeah.
he didn't die as a kid. He's not part of his like Batman origin. You know what I mean? Like
There was when they are in one of the tunnels underneath the fire pit. There's a couple of scenes in there where he's fighting, and after he has been like, forcefully weaned off of his Miraclo,
mm-hmm.
there's a comment in there that he is just as deadly of a fighter without his drugs because he's a surgeon and he knows how to tactically take somebody out.
and
And so
and
there's that little bit of, okay, so you really aren't just this indiscriminate going around shooting people Batman
right.
like we just saw a couple years ago in Flashpoint.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I do, and I feel like that idea is like a holdover from Frank Miller because there's that
Hmm.
whole fighting the mutant leader thing where it's like, like this is an operating room and I'm the surgeon. He's like
Sure.
fighting him and like hitting nerves and doing that kind of like that sort of thing, and I feel like that holds over to Thomas Wayne when they
Hmm.
do that. They go like, let's take that idea and like make it more literal. As far as I know, Flashpoint Batman didn't have a drug thing. Uh,
Yeah, I said I don't remember him having anything like that. He was
Earth Two
just
Batman, like you said, does he has yeah, he's addicted to Miraclo. He's addicted to Venom. At one point, he injects himself with Kryptonian DNA in
yeah,
World's End.
Superman's.
He does that.
Yeah.
So he's basically just juicing on whatever he can get. I think he's interesting though, because I think you're right. He's a softer Thomas Wayne than the Flashpoint one,
Hmm.
and I think he's pretty. I think he's pretty interesting that way. He maybe has a bit
Yeah.
more depth than the Flashpoint Batman does.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's even considering that we've gotten that Flashpoint Batman a lot recently.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, he was in the King run on Batman. He was also in, Flashpoint Beyond, obviously. He featured in The
He's
Button. Like, there's all, like,
currently Justice League Incarnate.
he was
Isn't he
on
part of that team?
he was on Justice League Incarnate, leading up to Infinite Frontier or right after Infinite Frontier. He was on
Yeah.
that team. So you're right. We've gotten quite a bit of him. Yeah, the I think part of the thing with the Thomas Wayne Batman is the Miraclo thing, as I recall, was a misdirect in Earth Two. It was like,
Okay.
who is this Batman? You're supposed to guess for a bunch, and then they revealed it in an annual or something. And I think they show him taking drugs, so you go like, oh, this is going to be Rex Tyler. Like you're supposed to think it's
Got it.
Hourman or something, and then it's not. But
Now that I like the Thomas Wayne of it all, and the humanity that he finds in trying to save his granddaughter.
yeah, I think the
That was a
relationship with
really
Helena
fun,
is great.
touching piece.
and
Yes.
and and near the end of World's End, he starts forging a relationship with Dick Grayson from
Hmm.
Earth 2. And Dick Grayson has never been Robin, is like not part of the Bat lineage. But right near the end of World's End, he sort of gets metaphorically and literally under the wing of Thomas Wayne Batman, and you
Hmm.
sort of start seeing a thing move there. And that happens, it continues a bit through Convergence, and then Dick Grayson ends up being the Batman of Earth 2 for a bit when you get ahead to Earth 2 Society, where they find a new
Hmm.
planet to settle on. Ultimately, at the end of that book, Helena Wayne is Batman.
Hmm.
She takes up the mantle, but we do have this era of Dick Grayson in there, and it's through Thomas Wayne, which is a sort of weird, interesting dynamic, but kind of works because Dick is an adult. Like he's not coming
Hmm.
in as a kid. There's something kind of neat there with they still keep the age dynamic a little bit. But
Yeah.
all right, let's move on to Instagram. Now we're going to Instagram, take some questions and answer them. First question comes from JMBC713, who asks, does Earth 2, or at least its characters, ever get revisited after the New 52?
Not after Earth 2 Society that
I
I am aware of.
I only have one exception to that I can think of. Well, there's one that I can think of. In the John Kent Superman book from just like last
Mm-hmm.
year or whatever, Valzad and the Lois Lane Red Tornado show up because they need John's help stopping Ultraman, who's been killing
That's
Superman
right.
through the multiverse. They show up for that, and so you see them there. I feel like you see Earth 2 Jay Garrick every once in a while when you see the flashes of the multiverse. Like
Hmm.
like in what was it called? Big Bang at the end of Dark Crisis. You
Oh
must
yeah.
surely just in the back of a
It
panel or something. He must be there, I would think. But I think
did
you're
we see did we see that? Oh no, we only saw all of the versions of Carter. I was gonna say, did we see that version of Kendra in any of the Hawkman stuff?
I don't think so.
I don't think
Um
we've seen her anywhere
I
since.
think you're right though. In general, we haven't really. The ones that I think
Hmm.
you would see are, like I say, there's Valzad and Red Tornado in that one particular circumstance. I think The Jay Garrick one does show up
Yeah.
in some version of a crisis related Flash kind of story. Um, I think largely, though, you're right. We don't really see the rest of them show up again after the new 52, which is too bad because I think they're interesting. Although, I mean, if I'm going to see someone, I want it to be Valzad. I think he's like probably
Sure.
my favorite character out of Earth 2.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
he's a Superman that took a vow of peace.
yeah, like a total pacifist Superman is very interesting. I like him. Uh, it's a good question. I suspect if there are other exceptions to this, it's that they're like drawn into the back of a panel somewhere. It's not that like we've missed some, you know, Earth 2 Alan Scott adventure or like,
Hmm.
like I don't think it's something like that. I think it's probably more that it's like they're there populating a thing. They were technically present for some multiverse thing, but we're mostly not looking at it, you know? Next question comes from Luchiman, who asks, are any of the regular Justice League members different or dead on Earth 2 compared to the regular timeline?
I mean, all of them are. Like that's kind of the whole point is the Trinity, Bruce Wayne, Batman, Clark Kent, Superman, and Diana, Wonder Woman, die
Yeah.
before the events of, or maybe it's in the first arc of Earth 2 when they started publishing it, either during that or right before it. Like they've
They
none of them are around. There's
they
no Hal, there's no Barry. Aquaman is even a different person. It's Queen Morella.
mm-hmm. the
Uh,
I think that
one
this
exception.
the setup on Earth 2 I think is that in the new 52 the idea is that Darkseid invades, the Justice League comes together, and then
Hmm.
5 years later is most of when the new 52 books are taking place.
Hmm.
The idea on Earth 2 is that same idea. 5 years earlier, Darkseid also invades Earth 2. That's when, like you say, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman die, stopping him. And
Hmm.
then we're 5 years later, and that's when Alan gets his powers, Jay gets his powers, Hawk Girl shows up, Khaled
Hmm.
gets the helmet. Like, we're this new era of heroes is being born on Earth 2 the way it was being born on Prime Earth.
So the one exception that I know of for sure is at the end of World's End, we meet Earth 2's Oliver Queen.
Yes, yeah.
And he's really the only Justice Leaguer that is present on Earth 2.
Yeah. I mean, it does make sense cuz Oliver Queen is also like from the 40s. He's also a golden
Yeah.
age character. It does, I think, track to have an Earth 2 version of him. Notably, though, he is Red Arrow, and he
Yes.
is supplanting the Connor Hawk Red Arrow who has died. There's like some weird shit happening there about just using names and things out of order. But Oliver Queen is Oliver Queen. Like they
Hmm.
talk about him and Bruce being like billionaire
They're
buddies and stuff like
buddies. Yeah, they're
that.
buddies in real life. Bruce trusted him with the Codex. Like he was,
Yeah.
for as best I can tell, a member of whatever team they had before that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he's in there. You're right though. Like Barry and Hal obviously aren't there. Arthur isn't even there, which is an interesting change because Arthur is also a Golden Age character. Could easily just be Arthur on that world, but you're right.
Hmm.
Queen Morella is the Aqua Woman. Um, there's the only Martian we meet is an acolyte of Darkseid's. Um,
So there's we might have had a Martian. Grundy has encountered Martians before. That world, Solomon Grundy has fought a Martian at some point.
right.
He makes a comment when he goes to set the forest on fire that, oh, I know what Martians are weak against.
Yeah,
I've fought these people before.
which does feel weird, but you're right. He does say that. That's a good point.
So, headcanon, if we're playing with our own personal headcanon
Yeah,
here,
let's do it.
there was an Earth 2 John Jones
Right.
that Solomon Grundy killed.
Interesting.
It's possible. I mean, so like the I would say even the big difference of not just that it's Alan and not Hal, but even the difference between Alan on Earth 2 and Alan in the
Mhm.
like the way we know him in the main continuity is that this Alan is explicitly the avatar of the green on Earth
Mhm.
2. It's still magic adjacent, still life adjacent. Like it's not wildly different, but the fact that he's the avatar of the green, it's not the Star Heart, it's the
The
green
green. Yeah.
chooses him. And Grundy is chosen by the rot of Earth 2,
Yes.
which is the gray, not the black on Earth 2.
And he's far too eloquent for Solomon Grundy for me.
Yeah, he just speaks. Also, he wears this like heavy metal like butcher's outfit, like that I kind of dig, but maybe not for Grundy. But I just like the look of it. Like I think it's kind of
I
cool.
mean,
But
honestly, like, if Anton Arcane and Solomon Grundy had a baby, this is what happens.
that is kind of what this character is in a way. Like not from an origin perspective, but the way he talks,
Design only.
design
Yeah.
wise, I think, and the fact that we're playing with the natural kingdoms. You're right that this Grundy is like 20% Anton Arcane,
Yeah.
which is a good way of putting it, I think. Um, yeah, I mean Jay. He's the Flash. I mean the big difference between him and the Jay Garrick we know is that he doesn't just collapse from hard water vapors and then be fast. Um,
Sure.
this one gets visited by Mercury, the last of the dying Roman pantheon, and is
Mhm.
given the power of speed. They also sort of imply that on Earth 2, it's the Roman gods, whereas on Prime Earth, it's the Greek Olympians, which I think
Yeah.
is a fun little detail. I kind of like that. Um, but yeah, so that's a difference. Um, but yeah, I mean, you're right. For the most part, yeah, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman are dead on
Mhm.
Earth 2. Those are the big ones. All right. Next question comes from Fuzz331, who asks, "You have any thoughts or opinions on Val-Zod? Always thought he was really interesting Earth 2 parallel to Clark, especially New 52 Clark at the time." So we brought him up a little bit. Give me your thoughts on Val-Zod. What do you think about this character?
I think he's great. And to your point, I'd love to, if I'm going to get to know anybody else from Earth 2, he's one I want to get to know.
Mm-hmm.
I like the Superman that has devoted his life to peace and does not want to fight. It is taking that. And I also understand where this question is because at New 52 at this point in time, we're not to convergence yet. The Superman we have is very brash, very young, very ready to just throw down.
Yeah.
And so your contrast here is a slightly older Superman who is first and foremost, I'm going to talk you down.
Yeah.
We're going to have a conversation. I don't want to fight.
Yeah.
It's like he was a fascinating character, and I like his costume design too.
Yeah,
Like I like the
he kind of
inclusion of
has
the
like a
white
he sort of
and
has a Man of Steel esque suit in that there's no belt, no
Mhm.
like underoos or whatever, just the
Yeah,
blue. But then yeah, white outline and S with a red shield, white cape. It's a very cool
it,
look.
it was very cool. Uh, I don't know. Like I said, he's great. I would love to get to know him a little bit more if we get. I mean, yep.
I mean, there's something I like about the idea that he's a Zod who has taken the path
Mhm.
of peace, because that feels like the real fulfillment of that idea of like make a world better than ours, which is like the thing
Mhm.
when you send Cal off into space as a baby or whatever, if you're thinking about like a movie like Man of Steel or something like that. I think it's
Sure.
interesting for Azad to be a full pacifist. I also think it's worth noting that this Val-Zod, when he lands on Earth, gets captured by the government and he's held for his entire life in a cell,
Yep.
and he still comes out of that experience believing in piece. It's the most Superman shit in the world. And back at the time, I went on this like long tirade. I was writing for like comics websites and stuff like that. And I went on this long tirade about how Val Zod was the cure to things like Man of Steel and and like stuff that was like all about deconstructing Superman. Like, what if Superman like gave up, or what if he had a really tough day, or like whatever the fuck. And I was like, Val Zod's the fucking cure for that. You throw anything at this guy, and he responds with doing things the better way. That he believes in it. That it might be harder. It might not even work, but it's worth doing. To not like corrupt your own soul, or things like that. It's a thing I love about that character, and it's a thing I hate about. I think it's Convergence number 0, if not, it's number 1. Because the first thing they have Val do is fight Telos. So just ignore Convergence, pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
but
yeah.
But every other version of Val Zod is held to this idea of being a pacifist. He'll defend himself, he'll throw or something like that, but he doesn't punch. He doesn't like just go to like fight people. He'll use his powers to save things, or to like divert, or to cause distraction, or to evade, or to like he's more creative.
He's the ultimate defensive fighter.
Yeah. There's a real like Aikido kind of thing about Val Zod that I like, that I think is neat.
Yeah.
Were you when you caught yourself before, were you gonna bring up the like, is it gonna happen, Michael B. Jordan Val Zod movie?
Nope, that was not where I was going.
Oh, okay.
I was probably gonna be far more inappropriate than that.
Oh God, on this show?
Well, okay, fine, fuck it, we'll go. We'll do this. We can edit it in post, right?
Yeah.
It's a very unfortunate thing that I think a lot of comic book readers have a very hard time with, looking at Val Zod and President Superman and seeing them as different characters at this point.
That might be true. We were getting used to President Superman, but we still haven't seen him a ton by this
not
point.
Since Justice League Incarnate, right?
Well, but like at this point in the comics, that hasn't even come out yet, and I'm not sure the Multiversity has come out.
Well, there were like going up against until Infinite Frontier, like there were a couple books he was showing up as part of the Justice League Incarnate team.
Yes.
And so we've had him in the last couple of years.
Yeah. But that's after this. You're right. At the time, we've only seen President Superman in Final Crisis, and then in an early adventure in New 52 Action Comics, I think.
So like I'm talking today, right? Like if we're gonna get to know Val Zod today, like I think it would be hard for a lot of comic book readers to go, oh, these are different Supermen.
Right. Gotcha. I think somehow this cool Earth 2 Val Zod Superman, Black Superman, didn't evade the trap of Krypton, which is that all the black people on Krypton come from one island. They all come from Vathlo Island, and they kept that. They were like, I'm from Vathlo Island. Look at me. It's like, of all the things that that we could jettison from the lore of Krypton, it's gotta be, we don't need Black People Island. They could just exist on Krypton, surely.
But like Val Zod is a pretty interesting mix of, because at this point, like when Val Zod is introduced, we have met President Superman,
right,
in Final Crisis, and then Val Zod's origin is almost step for step Superman's origin from Flashpoint.
Yes, yeah.
And so like we're taking these two concepts and creating a new character out of them.
Yes.
And it's like the Vathlo Island, okay, sure. That is President Superman's thing, but we're taking these two other versions of Superman and making one character out of them, which New 52, like this is supposed to be a major player going forward. We just haven't seen him in a decade, except for like one or two very brief guest spots.
And let's be honest about that too. Like that John Kent series, was that not a Tom Taylor joint? So, bringing in his character, which, creators always do. That's how new characters get a foothold, is that someone's like, well, I made them, I'm going to put them in over here or whatever. but like I would like to see someone else take up Val-Zod because I think he's
Sure.
worth doing. I think he's interesting. Um, Next question comes from Doug Thune, who asks, how did Lois Lane turn into Red Tornado, or was she made like the normal John Smith version?
Oh, this one's her dad.
Yeah.
So she died, and General Lane put her brain into the Red Tornado's body and created an android so that Lois could live again.
Is it her full on brain, or is it like memory engrams or like something like that? I can't.
It's
I honestly don't remember if she's like a
it,
brain in a jar like Robot Man.
I think it is the essence of her consciousness. And
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
like they draw a very clear line at some point, because when the Proto Furies, that's not
Right.
the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah. When the Proto Furies are coming out, they're part organic, part robot.
Right.
And the thing that Lois is like, what separates me apart? And they turn around and they go, you have a conscience, you have a soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are full consciousness just in a robot body. They're not. And so like it is.
I think that's also an interesting thing to explore because she's almost the opposite of the John Smith Red Tornado. The
Mhm.
John Smith Red Tornado, like, yeah, there's like weird stuff about like wind avatars living in this android body or whatever, but more or less is an android that, like Data, is learning to be human. And eventually
Mhm.
you go like, well, maybe he has his own version of a soul kind of thing. Like, and you kind of learn to accept him as a like sentient being.
Sure.
Whereas Lois is a fully sentient being put into a body that strips her of her humanity. Where you go like, yeah, you have a soul, and then you think about it, you go like, but does she?
Mhm.
you sort of,
I
you're
mean,
almost doing the opposite version. Like they meet in the middle somewhere.
they meet in the middle at Cyborg.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah,
Like it's the thing that Cyborg has struggled with forever,
right.
just turned all the way up to 11. You have no human parts left. You are full robot.
Yeah, and I mean and so I mean in a sense Lois does have a lot in common with something like Earth 2 Lois rather, the Red Tornado has a lot in common with someone like Cliff Steele, like Robot Man from the Doom Patrol.
Hmm.
There's something I mean Cliff has the added thing of being made of shitty robot parts that Lois doesn't have, but there is something kind of neat about that. I think she's got a cool design, very like sleek.
Oh yeah.
And I like without the cape. I think for the
Hmm.
Earth 2 one, she's extremely powerful. I mean, and I do like the idea of keeping Lois around, even without
Oh yeah.
Clark. Like it does feel right. And maybe the fall, like the pitfall of Earth 2 is that unlike the actual Golden Age, they can't escape the Trinity. We have to have a
Hmm.
Batman. We keep bringing Fury around to be like Wonder Woman. Um, we have Val-Zod. We even bring the actual Clark back briefly. Like
I mean,
maybe the problem with Earth 2 is that we never really shake the Trinity in the way that the Golden Age actually does.
mhm.
But but I do like Lois. I like her being around, even though she's sort of emblematic of keeping Superman in the loop.
Mhm.
But um, all right. Next question comes from Delgado Andrew, who asks, "Is there any precedent for New God activity on any version of Earth 2, or did this run set the stage for that?" So,
Oh,
like,
I mean,
yeah. Sorry, you
yeah.
go.
I mean, the Earth 2 started with Darkseid showed up, killed everybody, and left. It's like we established new gods basically from jump with Earth 2. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I I I had a look back pre Flashpoint. Even though there is, in the broad sense, the idea of the new gods as multiversal or Darkseid as multiversal, especially when you get to something like Final Crisis or whatever. Even though there is that, I I think the idea of like a specific tangible, let's call it focused interaction between Earth 2 and the New Gods isn't really a thing.
Mhm.
Like, it only is in the sense that they're implicated in the multiverse or whatever, you want to call it. I mean, Final Crisis is a weird one to bring up too, because we were only kind of just bringing the multiverse back by then. Um, but no, I don't really think there's a particular precedent before the New 52 for bringing the New Gods in. But you're right. They're there from get-go for Earth 2
Mhm.
in that book. You're right. Darkseid invades. Steppenwolf gets stranded on Earth and like takes over a country and shit like that. Like Steppenwolf just like lives on Earth too. Um and then of course like Mr. Miracle, Big Barda are part of that as well. They're part of Earth 2 as well. Um there's a thing that I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it when it comes to like Big Barda betraying Mr. Miracle and stuff like that. Fury's origin involves Steppenwolf and, Wonder Woman. Desaad becomes a big character in Earth 2 World's End. And just in terms of like being an adversary for like Kara and Helena, Desaad is in there.
Yeah.
We don't really see Granny Goodness particularly. We
Mm-mm.
don't see the main Furies. We get new Furies on Earth too. So we get some bits, but not all. We don't get Vermin Wunderbar. We don't get, well, we do get Calabac eventually.
We get
Um,
Calabac.
how do you feel about the Big Barda thing in World's End?
So
Because she is still fully a Fury. She
yes.
betrays Mr. Miracle for Darkseid.
So I thank you for bringing that up, because that was one of the other notes I had about this book. That was the thing I don't like. I'm just going to be upfront about that.
I agree. I also don't like it.
You had two options. You could either have Fury be the one that betrays and goes evil, or you could have Big Barda do it. If you're dead set on having it, right? It should have been Fury. Big Barda should have stayed good. Big Barda should have stayed with Scott. Big Barda can fill, to your point, like if we're trying to step away from the Trinity here, like Big Barda can step in and fill that Wonder Woman role and still be far enough removed from the Trinity that it works.
I don't know if this is unfair of me, but I feel like Tom Taylor has a little bit of a thing where he can be both a very compelling writer who does interesting stuff that is still interesting with the character, while also kind of being like a twist master where he's like, but what if on this time I do it like this? And so
Sure.
sometimes that works fine. Like what if, in Injustice, that shit works great. And you kind of go, awesome. But we get these new nuances of a character that feel authentic, but it's because something went haywire. And you could do that in Injustice. Earth 2, I think, is also liberating in the way where it's like, it's not the real ones. You can, like
you can do whatever you want.
There's that sort of thing to it. But I wonder if, I think this might be maybe the one textbook example of him fucking it up. I really, like, you're right. It's clearly meant to be a twist. Someone betrayed. But to have Barda already be with Mr. Miracle, like we've already done the arc of Escape Apocalypse, and then she goes, and it's not like she goes back, but it's a ruse. She's a Fury. She's a bad guy. At the end of this series, she stows away like fucking Scourge in Thor Ragnarok. She stows away on an escape ship, and she's like fuck, these goddamn humans. Like,
yeah, she stows away, and she has Dick Grayson's kid with her.
Yeah, she does. Yeah. So I agree. I don't think I like it.
That was a big one for me. I don't know.
And again, I think having the New Gods and all the Trinity clinging, that's when I say that Earth 2 took a turn, it's when it started bending back to what main continuity would do. Where I kind of go like, it's still fun, but like, like we get introduced in World's End to some other like Earth 2 characters, like you said, like Ted Grant. We get to meet a version of Obsidian. a brainwave of a version of Johnny Thunder called Jesse Thunder, Jenny
Joni.
Thunder, Joni
Joni.
Thunder. So we
Joni
have
Thunder.
like we get to meet versions of Earth 2 things, but it's like I wanted way more of that, but we're so hung up on the new gods. Even like Earth 2 Jimmy Olsen, it's like we're still stuck with Superman stuff, and he becomes Dr. Impossible. And you go like, is he?
Yeah.
Like
he kind of became Metron at one point, or like
it's
became a new god.
I just feel like we could have had a version of Icicle, a version of Shade, a version of, like insert more Earth 2 bad guys, the Mist,
right.
the like where's Starman, where's like, but because we kept drawing in this like Trinity shit and this like new gods dark side multiverse stuff, which I like generally, but that just made it so it's like, well, Earth 2 now just has to function like a regular Earth. Where's our characters that we like, as opposed to being a different place with different characters, all right. Next question. We're going on over to Reddit, where everyone's nice and no one's ever mean. And this question comes from Acknowledge Me, who asks, I absolutely loved the Earth 2 series from New 52. I understand that DC reintegrated the JSA members into mainline DC again, but why completely abandon the series post-Rebirth? The characters were so unique from their now mainline interpretations that they could have definitely kept some semblance of the title or universe alive. How do you feel about that?
I think we've talked about it a lot. Like, there are still a bunch of characters on Earth 2 that I'd love to get a little bit more time with and to learn more about. Man, I also recognize that this is a business, and right now the thing is there's a lot of characters.
Yeah.
And we still haven't, like, if we're going to look at everything from the last 12 years since New 52 kicked off, like, there are still characters out there that we have not reintroduced.
Sure.
I mean, it's like, we're getting back the Justice Society, we're getting back the Legion, we're getting back a bunch of these fan favorites, and with that, okay, like some of this stuff has got to take a backseat for a little bit,
right?
And right, like we see Val Zod and Red Tornado Lois make a guest spot in a Superboy book.
Yeah, right.
We might get that version of Jay making a guest spot in a big multiverse Flash family event. And there's not to say that they've been completely forgotten and discarded. What DC's good for a big multiverse-wide event that calls in everybody about every 5 or 7 years. We'll probably see him again here soon.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think you're right ultimately that it's about the number of characters. Now, right now, if you look at like the line of what DC publishes, we are in such a better state than we were 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
2 years ago, we were like 60% Bat titles. It was bad. There's way more diversity of things. We've got cosmic books. We've got stuff with Wildstorm characters. We've got more female-led books. We've got like stuff all over. It's going pretty well, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that it's just maybe one step too many is we've barely gotten our Justice Society back, and then to turn around and go, here's a totally different version of them running parallel, read them both is tricky. It's not impossible, but it's tricky. The one thing I'll say is that Earth 2 Society, which takes place after World's End and after Convergence. So just because I don't think we've actually said this out loud, I'm going to do this right now. At the end of Earth 2 World's End, Darkseid wins. The Earth gets destroyed. It gets swallowed by Apocalypse and destroyed. The last 2.5 million survivors get onto a multiversal generation ship, or a bunch of them, an armada of them. And I
have a fun little thing about that ship, but I'll let you finish.
And they head out to find a new world. Some characters that were on the surface of the Earth right before Apocalypse swallowed it get teleported to Telos. They're part of Convergence, where cities will live, cities will die. And at the end of that, they I think Telos becomes their world. Telos is
Mhm.
teleported back into the multiverse, into the Earth 2 universe, and that becomes the new world that they settle on. And then in Earth 2 society, we talk about like, is this really a world? It's kind of a shell of a planet. How do we build a new life? And the thing I'll give credit to Earth 2 society for is, even though it has a Batman, even though Valzad is Superman, even though Kara is there as Power Girl and stuff, that book goes out of its way to bring us more Earth 2 shit. Ultra
Mhm.
Humanites there. Like we work in some more of, I would say, Justice Society, Injustice Society stuff than the previous Earth 2 books were doing. Is
Yeah.
it as much as I would want? No, probably not. But we do work more of it in, and we go out of our way to do it, which I think is good and smart, and I like that. I, I think I'm with you. I would like to see them show up like as actual characters in some kind of event context.
Mhm.
I don't know that like just should we just follow their continued adventures? They'd be fine, but I don't know that we're in the position for that, like as a publishing line. But I would definitely want to check in with them again. I want to know that they're still there and stuff's still going on for sure. Now, you
Yeah.
wanted to talk about the
Oh yeah.
generation ships.
Yes. Okay. Not about the ships themselves, the names of them.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
This is my own little nerdiness coming out.
All right.
Um, there were two ships that we see throughout the whole World's End series. We see the Shackleton
Right.
that they drive to Apocalypse. Drive. We fly to Apocalypse.
They drive it. Yeah.
They drive it on the space road to Apocalypse, and they plant the bombs. And then the big like arc life-saving ship is the Endurance.
Mm-hmm.
So Edward Shackleton was a boat captain in the early 1900s, and his boat, the Endurance, was the most famous one that got lodged in the
Mm-hmm.
Antarctic Circle, and him and his men lived there for 14 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Shackleton, famous
Um,
polar
yes,
explorer.
like I saw those, and I'm like, I know what that is. I read
Yeah.
a book about that every year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do like when there's little details like that for
Yeah, it was
nerds
just
to
one of those
enjoy.
fun little like, ooh, hey, this is fun.
Totally. All right. We've got just a couple of questions left. We're heading on over to the doc scored. Fuck. Oh yeah, just shrink out of the. Now I'm on my own. Uh, uh, yeah. Let's see.
You're on your own. You're all doc scored. All by myself. Is that
That was good, and I don't think I've done that song before, so we're gonna count that. That was good.
yeah.
Uh, we're going to constipated Gandalf, who asks, "Who is the accountable?"
Oh yeah, there was a little, was that Jimmy?
It was, yeah,
Yeah. Jimmy is a hacker.
yeah,
That's right. Like there was this little like one-off like couple pages at the very beginning of the first issue, maybe.
yes,
Bruce and Helena are flying to take down the hacker syndicate, and their leader is the accountable.
yeah. And this was from the main Earth 2 title, I think, too, which was also still kind of going. Like, if you just read World's End, you go like, "I'm missing something, surely." Like issue to issue, kind of like something's missing here. It's because Earth 2, I think, was also still coming out. Um, but yeah, Earth 2 Jimmy Olsen was a hacker called the Accountable. He eventually merges with a mother box and is made, as Calibec calls it, he's made God flesh. He is turned into
Merges
a
with a
new
mother
god.
box and the helmet of Naboo.
Yes, and the Helm of Naboo, which they describe as a kind of mother box on Earth 2.
Mhm.
Um, and and he eventually becomes Doctor Impossible. That full transformation actually happens into Earth 2 society. But
Mhm.
he becomes a new god during Earth 2 World's End when he merges with the Helm of Naboo in a mother box. and has all these kind of like powers of the source kind of things at his disposal. But yeah, he started as a hacker called the Accountable. That's who
Yeah,
that is. It's Jimmy.
it's it's honestly, it's Jimmy Olsen. That absolutely makes sense. Nothing there is out of the realm of possibility for Jimmy Olsen.
Totally. Okay, next question from Butt Fart Butt, who asks, which Earth 2 heroes do we lose in World's End? Who dies? Who doesn't make it?
Who doesn't make it? Um, did we lose anybody?
I'll mention one. So the Earth 2, like Al Pratt the Atom,
That's right.
had in the main Earth 2 book, he had lost his arm fighting Brutal, which was essentially like an Earth 2 Bizarro Superman. He had lost his arm fighting him, and he was in like a coma or something like that. He eventually wakes up and he sacrifices himself to get shot down miles into the Earth's crust and then grow to enormous size to basically hollow out a sort of safe haven for the survivors of Earth. And so they call it Adam's Haven, and he dies doing it, basically. They don't do, I would say, a great job of explaining why that kills him, why his body is able to hollow out that Earth, but also it kills him. They just all seem to know it will, and then it does.
Yeah, comic books. Because Speed Force.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want to count Barbara Gordon,
Gordon,
we lose her.
Barbara Gordon gets shot and dies. She's married to Dick Grayson. They have a son. She's a cop. And she gets shot by some like ruffians who want more rations or like whatever the fuck it is. And she just fucking dies.
Because what? Hawk Girl makes it out. Flash makes it out. Lantern makes it out.
Yes.
We see Tornado and Superman and Kara.
Does Captain Steel die?
I don't think so.
I
don't remember him dying.
Another big character from Earth 2, but not a superhero, is Commander Khan, the main commander of the World Army. He dies in this book. He's betrayed by Terry Sloan. We've talked about this. And he tries to sacrifice himself by like flying a ship with a bomb on it at Darkseid. And in like a big kind of like fuck you moment, Darkseid Omega beams it before it can get to him. So he sort of dies for nothing. But Commander Khan is a big one. Because he was a pretty prominent character in that book, even though he wasn't a superhero. Who else?
I genuinely can't think of anybody else.
Does Ted make it? Does Ted make it to Earth 2 Society?
I think maybe we just kind of lose track of Ted. I don't remember him dying.
I can't remember if he makes it or not. Because Yolanda Montez ends up making it. Like
but she's the avatar of the Red.
Well, she was, and then it's taken. That power gets taken from her because the parliaments almost all die. But she retains her like claws and stuff, and so that's leading up to her being Wildcat.
Right.
So she and Batman and Dick Grayson and Val Zod and Alan Scott and Jay Garrick and Hawkgirl, or without Hawkgirl, all end up on Telos in Convergence. They get transported to Telos.
I'm pretty sure Hawkgirl ends up there. I don't know why I recall seeing her in that series, but I do.
So those characters like appear to die but don't, and then they reunite with everyone when they kind of rejoin the multiverse. I mean, to be honest, not very many characters like full on die in World's End. Technically, the death of Kal-El is in World's End because
I was gonna say
we thought he died fighting Darkseid the first time. We learn he had been captured by Desaad. His DNA's been corrupted by Desaad making these fucking clones of him and shit. And they free him and he sacrifices himself to poison the clone factory, basically, with his corrupted DNA. So technically, Kal-El dies in World's End.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, not very many of the main characters actually die during that. Next question from Drago the Black Rose, who asks, there's only one dark side, correct? Does that also apply for the new gods? And finally, does Darkseid remember every DC reboot? This is the most complicated question in the world. This question comes up so often. And my answer has changed because comics have made it change in between each time I've answered it.
So, Darkseid exists in the realm of the gods, which exists outside of the multiverse. So by this logic,
it's outside the orrery. Yes, yeah.
Right. So by this logic, there is only one Darkseid across all of the multiverse. That said, here I should have asked you this a year ago when I was trying to remember this book. I have a memory of a book or a handful of panels where there is a Darkseid going from almost like multiverse to multiverse, killing other versions of him and taking them all back into himself to become the ultimate Darkseid again.
Yeah. So I think that, a recent episode that we could draw on for this conversation is us talking about like God and stuff like that. What you said is right. The sphere of the gods is outside the orrery of worlds. So theoretically, in that conceptual realm, these things exist once and then they manifest into the multiverse. So that counts for Darkseid. Because, for example, Earth 51 is an Earth in which all of the new gods have a manifested form. Darkseid, Highfather, Mr. Miracle, Light Ray, Big Barda, like the Kirby era new gods exists on Earth 51. That's what that Earth is. They are not the multiversal versions of them. Mr. Miracle and Big Barda turn up on Prime Earth for Darkseid War. They are not the same ones that were on Earth 2. You can tell from how they talk and how they interact, and that Barda's not fucking evil. they're not
pretty simple.
They're not the same. So they're manifestations into that world, the physical realm in the multiverse. Theoretically, the same thing is true for Darkseid, though the New 52 heavily implies that he's a singular entity. The thing that you're talking about is during Infinite Frontier, where we're introduced to the final Darkseid. This is a Darkseid that has no manifestations. He has no abstractions. He is not. There's not a sliver of him manifesting on a world. There is one Darkseid in the multiverse.
Darkseid is,
and what we see is we see him kill Thanatos, which is the Earth 8 version of him. That's essentially Thanos. He kills Thanatos. We see that and absorbs him back into himself. So the existence of the final Darkseid kind of dispels the idea of it being the exact same Darkseid that invaded both Prime Earth and Earth 2 at the start of the New 52. It's, to bring it back to the conversation, the God conversation from a few episodes ago. On Apocalypse, in the sphere of the gods, does that Darkseid know all of those events? He might. Yeah.
Sure.
Does that mean that on Earth 2, when Alan Scott punches Darkseid, is that the same Darkseid that went on Prime Earth when they punch him? He goes like, just like Alan Scott did. Not necessarily.
Probably
not. Not necessarily. And because we made the distinction of the final Darkseid, well, what I should say is, I suspect Darkseid, there is only one Darkseid, but he manifests in. And we'll count that the same for all new gods. What I don't know is what this new all-in absolute universe thing is going to do to Darkseid. Because Darkseid is obviously central to these absolute titles that are coming in and this new publishing initiative All In. Darkseid is back. We haven't seen him since Dark Crisis, where he was like a puppet, so The answer to this might change yet again, but for right now, I I think the answer is it's kind of both. There is only one of them, but when they have to show up as a material thing in a physical realm, you're just seeing a bit of them. It's the argument that we made a couple of episodes ago where it's like a stomach cell of yours is technically you, but is it all of you? No.
Right.
It's correct of it to say it's you. It's also correct of you to say you're you. Does that mean you know everything your stomach cell knows? No. Does that mean your stomach cell is everything you are? No. And that might be like the closest we could get to a way of thinking about it. That fucking question. Truly, it's come up like 6 times. I think my answer has changed every time.
Do you want to explain that one, or do you want to explain Power Girl again?
Man. No, it's a good point. All right, here's a fun one to end on. Our last question comes from Bisexual Lad, who asks, would you say this story solidifies this version of Alan Scott as being more powerful than the classic one we know? Seems like his connection to the green outperforms even Swamp Thing's.
Yes. And my reason for that is the piece that I skipped my mind a couple minutes ago. It's not just the green anymore.
Yeah.
He took in the powers of the Avatar of the red, the white, and the rot.
Yeah.
And so he took in the essence of the earth.
Yeah.
At the end of that. And so he took all of that into him. And so now he is an entirely different thing. He's no longer just the Avatar of the green. He's no longer, he was never the wielder of the Starheart. But I mean, yes, I very much believe that if this Alan Scott goes up against classic Golden Age Alan Scott, this Alan Scott wins. The one that I think would be interesting is Kingdom Come Alan Scott.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so we talked about it, that the Furies that we see in Earth 2 World's End are not the regular ones. It's not Mad Harriet and Bernadette and Stampa. They're like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So there's famine, there's war, there's pestilence, and there's death. In this world, they are each the last surviving member of a different alien species. So War is a Tamaranian with a name I love. Their name is Killy, which I think is great.
So I read it as either Killy or Kali. That's how I ended up saying it, to just go along with.
Kali is more interesting. I was reading it like Killy, like they're a little Killy.
Yeah.
Pestilence is a Zarnian.
We don't know what the first famine is.
Oh, the first famine is from War World. I think we're meant to assume that they're like Mongol.
Okay. Because I know the second famine becomes Helena.
Yes. And then Death is a white Martian. So these Furies in Earth 2 World's End, they go to attack the parliaments of Earth, the Parliament of Earth, which on Earth 2 is, like you said, the green, obviously, the gray, which is the rot, the red, obviously, but then also the white, which is air, and the blue, which is water and things like that. All those other avatars either die or lose their powers. All those parliaments are either killed or sacrifice their powers into Alan Scott, basically the last avatar of the parliaments of Earth. And in that moment, to add to what you're saying, he doesn't just tap into all the power of the Earth. He uses the words that he's tapping into, the quote, multiversal green.
Yep.
So he is theoretically accessing natural kingdom powers from across the multiverse in that moment. He is wildly powerful. And our Alan Scott is no fucking slouch. But that Earth 2 Alan Scott in this series is like borderline God. Kind of like when you get to like Jon Stewart, like the Builder, where he like kind of
Hmm.
incarnates Green Lantern, like that kind of thing, where he sort of upgrade, or John's like a guardian or whatever, like he sort of upgrades, right?
Yeah.
It's I would say that this Alan Scott is almost like that, where he's kind of
Hmm.
taken on a new level,
He's like half a step away from godhood at this point.
I feel like in Earth 2 society, he actually gives life to the entire planet because they realize they're
That's
living on
awesome.
Telos and it's like sort of like a fake planet. It's like a shell of a planet. There's no real resources there. And I'm pretty sure Alan brings the planet to life,
Hmm.
which is something. Yeah, he's crazy, crazy powerful. Yeah, I would say he's more powerful than Swamp Thing for sure.
Yeah.
That's it for the questions. Is there anything else about Earth 2 World's End that we didn't get to talk about or that you want people to know if they're like, do I read this? Do I not? What should I do?
Yeah. I think it's worth reading. Truly, I do. I mean, I think we hit everything that I had notes on. I really do think it's worth reading. I think it's worth going back and revisiting, both if you are familiar with the Golden Age superheroes and Golden Age Justice Society, or you're not. This is a really fun introduction to new characters, because I guarantee, like, the characterization of Alan is nothing like the Alan Scott that you think of.
Yeah.
Same with Jay Garrick. I mean, he's a little bit Bart, he's a little bit Wally, he's a little bit Barry, he's a little bit all over the place, but he's not Jay Garrick that you think of.
Yeah.
Like, it's a fun story. And the fact that you can kind of, for all intents and purposes, read it as a self-contained story at this point, from Earth 2 through Earth 2 World's End, makes it good.
Yeah.
I think it's worth revisiting. The one piece I'll throw in, just to tie it into the spooky Doctober, is if you want a really good horror scene, the death spawn coming out of death.
Yeah.
Yo, that is straight out of a horror movie.
It's
I
fucked
saw
up.
that panel. I'm like, there's the Doctober tie-in.
Yeah, it's definitely that's pretty fucked. Yeah. I also think like the kind of clone factory and Desaad and
Oh
stuff like
yeah.
that is pretty messed up, which is kind of good Ducktobery sort of thing as well. I think it's worth reading. I think of the three Earth 2 titles, it's the weakest. But
Sure.
but it also bridges the two. Like you kind of need it in some ways. Like I do think it suffers a little bit from being like we have 26 issues, but we only have 18 issues worth of story. I think
Yeah.
I think Earth 2 World's End does suffer a little bit from placeholderism, and that can make reading it a little bit tough.
So
But the like overall idea of it is neat enough. But I do think sometimes we're spinning our wheels a little bit. Like,
yeah. I mean, kind of, to your point, I think one of the things that Earth 2 World's End specifically suffers from is trying to tie it into the mainline continuity.
yeah,
Because, like, trying to do the thing with Future's End all at the same time and be like, look, we're all part of the same thing. We're just like, just use Earth 2 to tell really cool stories about these heroes that people know but don't really know because they're 50 years old.
yeah, and
Update
yeah,
them,
I think you're
redo
right.
them, have fun with it.
That's the missed opportunity. But if you can get through that and you're just following like the arc of it and you read Earth 2
Mhm.
Society, I think you could find Earth 2 Society pleasantly surprising.
Mhm.
Not that it 100% fixes it, but it does kind of get more to what you're talking about and further away from what World's End was doing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely worth giving it a shot.
Right on. Well, thank you so much, Josh, for making time to come back on to talk about this book. Really appreciate it. Love geeking out with you. Let the people know what you're up to, where they can find you, what you got going on.
Yeah, I mean, you can follow along pretty much everything I'm into on Instagram, the real Josh Gill. Um, I don't know, just over there sharing a bunch of stuff that I'm into right now. Doing my best to help as many people as I can over there.
Yeah, right on. Go check it out. The Real Josh Gill. You'll know that you're there because, my God, is he good looking. Um, thank you again.
What you don't see is there's a gigantic mirror right behind my computer screen, so I can just look at myself the entire time.
So every time you've been smiling on this record, you've just been looking at you.
Yeah, God, could you imagine if I was that kind of person? That'd be awful.
I don't know if I've told this on the podcast before, but my parents basically told me this story that, like, from a very early age, if they needed me to occupy my own time, they'd put me in front of a mirror. And then they could get the laundry done. They could do the full narcissist.
This is not Confessions Month, Reed.
No, you're right. Sorry. What's spookier than telling the truth? So Darktober will continue. You'll see the calls for questions going out for that. Thank you again, Josh.
Thank you.
Reach out, send your questions in all Darktober long. We're Dr. DC Podcast wherever you find us. And then, of course, there's the Patreon, patreon.com/DrDC. There's extra stuff going on there. At the $1, $5, and $7 level, you get the doc scored. At those higher levels, you get the double dose, or you get rewatch podcasts. I'm about to unveil what the next Golden Age rewatch series is going to be. So we're getting close to that. And that all helps to support us. And of course, even though he's not here physically, we gotta let Richard know that we're thinking about him by going and listening to Ghost Facers, a supernatural rewatch, where Richard and I are going through every single episode of the CW Supernatural. We talk about real world monster lore, behind the scenes stuff about the show. It's grand old time, and that helps to support us too. So do all of that and come back.
This is a Brain Freeze podcast.
Adios.
Ciao, ciao.